Hello, y'all. It's me again.
Did you miss me?
I'm back. And I'm not going to be doing a movie review because I've decided that is not what I want to do too often on this YouTube channel. Sorry, y'all who followed just for that. I'm doing different stuff now. So let's get straight to it. So I have the Wong Kar Wai Criterion Box Set. Wait. All right, now I do. So for those of you who subscribe to me, as y'all already know, I am a huge fan of films, and there's a big variety of films from all around the world that I'm into. And one of my favorite directors, who you saw me speak firsthand when I became exposed to him on this channel, Wong Kar Wai, has an incredible resume and plethora of films. Very different, but very experimental, especially for Chinese films. And so, of course, when I heard he was going to make a Criterion box with all his films in it, I had to go all out, and lo and behold, I have it right here. Except, do I really have his films? Now, one of the reasons why I'm making this video is because, as those of you who may or may not know, Wong Kar Wai did many restorations with his films in this box set. It was 4K restorations, but he also changed some of the cuts to the film, even changed aspect ratios to some of the films, or just changed the entire look completely, which may tamper with the original look of the films that people have grown to fall in love with over the years. And as y'all know me, or if you don't, I don't like that. I don't like that one bit. So in this video, I'm deciding to go over and watch each and every single one of his movies in high definition and see which one is better, why he decided to do this, and what you should do as the consumer to possibly get the best experience you can with this group of films, and sort of what to do with that. So that being said, the 7 movies that are in the collection are as follows: As Tears Go By, Days of Being Wild, Chungking Express, Fallen Angels, Happy Together, In the Mood for Love, and 2046. Now, of course, I have these new tempered with Criterion versions. I have some physical versions of the original versions of the movies, along with other sources to check these films out. So that being said, let's go straight into it. First movie, As Tears Go By. I'm going to watch the original HD cut, and then I'm going to watch the Criterion cut. Tell y'all which one works better, which one has better visuals, audio, and which one I prefer between the two. As Tears Go By was one of the most interesting experiences, even though it was my first experience, because the difference between the original and the restored Criterion version are night and day, like completely night and day. Let me give some examples. So the cinematography is very smoky, sort of blue, the cold. The night scenes are very clear and well lit. It's like an intentional cinematography. It goes for like a baby blue, oversaturated version of just the entirety of Twilight, but it works for this movie, unlike Twilight. The day scenes, however, aren't the cleanest. They're actually pretty ugly. There's a scene where there's like a fight at night, and it's very, very, very bright blue. The B-roll nature footage kind of looks a bit rough and overexposed at points. And there's a rain scene that looks really rough, but the scene right after looked pretty good, and involving like a bar or something like that. But yeah, definitely not the cleanest look. It was definitely something for the time before the Criterion came out. If this was the only version, I wouldn't be complaining. And the audio didn't sound that good. It almost sounded like a bootleg 80s VHS audio. For a second, I thought it was literally the fault of the movie, and the translation for the most part is definitely way more profane, very different, but still the exact same idea as the Criterion version, so you're not really missing much with that. You're just getting a completely different translation with certain insults that might hit more on the original version. As for the Criterion version, whew. Okay, so I know I'm supposed to be bashing these changes, but dude, this restoration was beautiful. Again, night and day difference. The blood looks bloodier. There's more of a turquoise look to it rather than like an overexposed baby blue. There's better saturation. There's even a scene at the beginning where it's like this beautiful teal and orange contrast. The night scenes look stunning, dark blue, almost green. There's a pool scene where the pool table was completely green and vibrant. There's a fight scene near the beginning that I mentioned earlier where it just feels a bit warmer in comparison to the original. And there's this scene, dude, the wedding scene. It's literally night and day difference between the original cut and the restoration. That wedding scene is like demo worthy. Like it almost looked like HDR just on a 1080p screen. It was incredible.
各位，喂，細聲啲啊，細聲啲啊！
But there are some flaws with it. I mean, there's a scene right after that rain scene that I mentioned looked terrible. It actually looks good in this cut. The scene right after is a bit too dark and underexposed for my liking and a bit oversaturated. And there's a scene where the protagonist or the main guy pins Maggie against the wall, which, by the way, she's so goddamn beautiful. Woo! But yeah, something about the image just didn't look right, and there are a few moments in the movie where it feels like that. But again, such a great restoration. In terms of audio, it's ever so slightly better, but definitely better. The footsteps actually sound like footsteps this time. The music sounds great, and the vocals don't really peak or make it seem like your speakers are peaking. So good on that. And again, the translation is different.
屎忽鬼！你講咩你啊？我講咩啊？我話你屎忽鬼啊！冇翅你食啊？冇鮑魚你食啊？
But overall, this is like a 90% better translation. There's one scene involving like a why didn't you visit sooner scene, without spoiling it, where the translation with the original hit emotionally a little harder. But other than that, it made a lot more sense. Throughout the whole movie, there's this brotherhood or like this code of brother stuff going on. And you sort of catch on to it later on with the subtitles. You catch it immediately with the Criterion cut, and I think that's a strength. So yeah, overall, very impressive remaster. If you had to ask me what version you should watch, I'd say go for the Criterion cut. It's way better. It's again a night and day difference. Maybe it's tampering with the original cinematography. Again, I would have preferred they put both versions on the disc. I'm going to say that for every one of these. But yeah, great restoration. As for the original is like a 6 out of 10 look, this Criterion restoration is like an 8, like a low 9, but like still up there. It's that good in my eyes. But yeah, that was that. Great restoration. That means we can only go up from there, right? Right? Very interesting. That was my opinions on As Tears Go By from 1988 and which one I thought was better. The next film we're going to be doing is Days of Being Wild. Let's get straight into it. Let's get straight into Days of Being Wild. So, between the two, there's a clear, concise winner, but the differences are a lot less present than the past film I talked about. Let's go over the two, starting with the original. So the visual in the restoration of the original, there's a very old look, but it's very clear, very deliberate film grain, which is, just how the image, I believe, looked back in the day. The indoor night scenes have an almost bright green, almost white color palette. And some of the brighter scenes have white elements, but sometimes can be a bit too overexposed. But the night scenes, the outdoor night scenes are very well lit, but sometimes cloudy to replicate that sort of old Hong Kong cinema look to it. I don't know. And there's a scene where he's walking to the Philippines and the image went from very bright and well lit to very dark and almost hard to see. I don't know if that was a problem with the transfer or if that's how the original film looked. Who knows? But that's the visual aspect for that. For the audio, it's not the clearest, but definitely balanced. There was no peaking, unlike the original cut of As Tears Go By, which is the first film I talked about. And there's a scene where music is playing on a record player, and it's not the clearest, sort of has like an old vintage crashy sound to it, but that might be the point, who knows. And as for the subtitle translations, they're pretty good. Nothing to complain about there. I understood everything throughout the entirety of the watch. Going on to the Criterion version, let's go with the visuals. So there's definitely film grain present, but in a way it has a clearer, almost nicer image. It has darker darks, but it looks very similar to the other version, I guess the original version. The night scenes are greener, brights have higher contrast. The outdoor scenes tend to have better balance. And there's some really green greens in some of the images and some blues near the end rain scenes. And the Philippine walk scene stays one brightness and looks good consistently, which is great. And the final scene, taking place inside a train, had much better balance with the image. It looked better. It felt clear, and you were getting sort of the same idea, same feeling, but with the better, crisper image, and I thought that was great. As for the audio, it sounds basically the same. I noticed that the music playing on the record player sounded a bit clearer, which, is great also. And the translation wasn't too different. Definitely a better English translation than the original, but still there. You still get the point. It wasn't, again, night and day difference like As Tears Go By. It's a very good translation and stays true to the original. And between these two versions of the same film, I guess I'm going to have to go with the Criterion version, not only because it looks and sounds better and has better looking images and crisper quality, but because, you know, the Blu-ray comes with supplements and some cool, there's an alternate version of the film you could watch, which is a 35 millimeter scan, which is really cool. And so, yeah, for this one, I say the clear winner's Criterion. No surprise there. And yeah, that being said, let's go straight to the next one. Please save this time. Please save this time. I don't want to record this for a fourth time. Good one. Not bad. You know, all good things must come to an end, but we're not even close to there. The next film I'm going to be going over is Chungking Express right now. Alrighty, so let's talk about Chungking Express real quick before I go into the stuff I liked and stuff I didn't like. This is going to be the longest segment where I talk about the differences because this film, as I was watching the movie, I learned that it has two cinematographers. For the first segment, it's the cinematographer Andrew Lau, who also worked with Wong Kar Wai on his first film, As Tears Go By, which makes a lot of sense when you're watching the movie. And then the second half was done by Christopher Doyle, which, you know, makes sense for that segment. And so you get different pictures and different feelings for each of those segments in both versions. So I split both of the visual restorations between the first segment and the second segment. So without wasting any more time, let's go into the original and then let's speak about the restorations. So as for the visuals for the original, there's a very good image source to it for the first segment. The opening scene has a lot of blue, it has a lot of yellows. There's a scene near the opening where the main character, he's on the phone, and it has incredible picture to it, and especially color correction. It just looks so great. It has a bit of a cloudy look to it, but that's the point, and it feels very deliberate rather than a flaw. The color when the glasses girl is at the bar near the beginning is very yellow, but not too yellow, and looks good for the entire scene. But sometimes the bright indoor scenes could be a bit overexposed, such as the convenience store scene near the beginning. You know, it just looks a little too bright. And there are a lot of blue exterior shots in the first segment, which really sort of coincides with Andrew Lau's original cinematography in As Tears Go By, and it works, and it almost pays homage to his first film, which I think is really cool, and I really like the look of that. And in the scene where the main character and the girl with glasses are in the bar together drinking, the reds really pop out in this version, and especially with her lipstick, it all looks pretty good. As for the second segment, this color palette has very light blues, such as like a baby blue look to it near the beginning, especially when he's in the Midnight Express shop, you know, eating food. There's some pretty bright indoor scenes, but never too overexposed. In the second segment, there's a lot of blue and yellow colors between this entire segment, such as literally the main character wearing a blue shirt and then Faye Wong's character having this yellow t-shirt. And then there's like very light green on his walls. And then there's scenes where Faye Wong's character is cleaning. Those can tend to be very foggy and overexposed at points, but not too terrible. It's just not a really good looking picture. And then the California bar scene near the end has some incredible coloring done to it. As for the audio for the original version, it's great audio. Again, it's a 2008 original Criterion, so it has sort of this explosive 5.1 sound to it. And the translation is pretty damn good, and in my opinion is better than the restoration. Let's get into it. So the restored version of Chungking Express, let's go over the first segment, visuals. There's less shadows, less contrast, but the darker exposure in the beginning is so ugly. There's a new title sequence, which is fine, like it's kind of cool, I guess. But the opening sky shot right after the title sequence happens is so much darker, almost to a flaw, almost as if they made it too dark by mistake. But I mean, technically you're getting a sharper image for sure. Like with the 4K restoration, there's not much film grain or anything. You're getting a clearer looking image. But like the opening bar scene where the girl with the glasses' character is in that yellow bar that I mentioned before, it's very yellow in this version, almost too yellow, like mustard. The image is nicer on the eyes, but it's just too dark. It's really difficult to even see anything going on. And there's a scene where she's sleeping in a hotel while the main character's eating like salad or something. That scene was very well lit. It actually looks a bit better than the original, but again, it's just too dark. And the first segment really doesn't leave a good first impression. The second segment, however, I will say clear image. It gets rid of sort of the fog look for the most part. It has some good colors. There's a flashback romance scene where he's like remembering a moment with his ex, and it looks a lot better than the original. Overall, the color palette in the second segment, there's a lot of yellows, there's a lot of blues, even with their shirts, literally, as the man is wearing like a blue cop shirt and Faye Wong's character is wearing like a yellow t-shirt. But the shirts look desaturated, like they don't pop to the eye as much as the original version, and I don't know why. And there's not much color during the sleep scene where they're like sleeping on the couch, but that's fine if you're gonna desaturate anything from that second segment. That's one thing I don't really mind. The California scene near the end has all right coloring, but the time lapse of him putting the quarter in the jukebox looks way better, but the coloring doesn't pop out in any way like it did with the original Criterion version. The shirt in the sky scene, there's a scene where he puts like his ex's shirt and hangs it up to dry. That scene looked so much better than the original. And overall, the ending looks better, but it's just different enough to really notice, like, when you see them back to back, which is what I did, you notice that the ending looks a lot different, even though it looks better. And yeah, as for the audio, it's very good, basically identical to the original, maybe even better at points, who knows. And the translation, not a fan. Very different password over the phone. The original version was a lot cuter and hit better. This one just felt kind of lame. And then there's different explanations to certain things, just with like different usage of English, but it's the same idea. So the translation's not the worst, but it's definitely not as good as the original. And so, yeah, going over all that, it's clear that there's a lot of things that detract from the better experience of the restorations. Because yes, you're technically getting a better looking image. The second segment could arguably look better to some people, but the first segment is fugly looking, dude. Like it's so hard to see anything going on. It looks so much worse. And while you're getting that sharper image, you're not getting those same colors or that same pop, that same feeling of Andrew Lau's original cinematography done in the original version. And it's sad because they did such a good job at like restoring, but making the image look better with As Tears Go By. It still has that Andrew Lau feel to it. And if you watch As Tears Go By restored Criterion, which I said was better, and the Chungking Express original Criterion, you can definitely see that the same cinematographer worked on both films, or at least the first segment in Chungking, but they just completely bastardized his vision and his look, and it just looks so much worse. I don't know what Wong Kar Wai was thinking. I don't know why they didn't put the original version in. Yeah, the restored version, I can't give credit to the second segment when the first one looks so bad. It leaves a good taste because of the second segment, but it never washes out the bad taste from the darkness and just the overall terrible, terrible image of the first segment. And so for that reason, I'm going to say the clear winner for this one is the original Criterion. Go seek it out in any way you can, whether it's the actual disc or a copy on the internet. I'm just saying. And so yeah, that being said, on to the next one. Alrighty, next one we're going over is Fallen Angels. This one I've seen both versions of already, but I'm going to be watching them again for the sake of this video, going over what I liked, what I didn't like about both versions, and yeah, let's see where that goes. Alrighty, so now's the point where I talk about Fallen Angels. So first off, I want to preface this by saying that this is the remaster that was so botched and so bad when I first saw it that got me interested in this entire Wong Kar Wai restorations and which version's better. And so if I seem very passionate or opinionated in this specific part, it's because I am, and this is my favorite movie in his entire catalog, and it's arguably one of the worst restorations ever, but possibly the worst in this entire catalog. And so yeah, that being said, let's go straight to the original. So the original is a beautiful image, like a really good looking image. There's a lot of colors that pop out in certain scenes, such as the bar scenes with the jukebox or the cityscape scenes where he is riding the bus and you just see the color of the entire area, and it just looks so freaking nice and awesome, and you're just watching and you're like, wow, what a great image. The greens really pop out in scenes where he's on the motorcycle or the guy is prepping for the shootout scenes, and even like the McDonald's scene has like a lot of of yellow, but like feel to it. It's not too desaturated or oversaturated. It just works with the image. As for like the black and white scenes, yes, while there's some of the grainier and messier looking images in this original HD release, it's so purposeful because the director, Wong Kar Wai, and the cinematographer, Christopher Doyle, were met with a lot of limitations when making this movie. They would look at some of the scenes and notice that in post it just looks bad in color. So they compromised, like most filmmakers do, and made it black and white. It adds more purpose and almost like a meaning to those original black and white scenes and just makes them work so well. And as for the audio, it sounded incredible. The translation was so good. It basically was word for word the exact same in the Criterion, which is the perfect segment to talk about the Criterion. This Criterion looks terrible. Let's address the elephant in the room, the aspect ratio. Why is it different? You'll see later. What Wong Kar Wai does with making this a new, wider image is he distorts the original image or the intent of the original image to the point where in some scenes, such as him sitting on the bus or the girl walking through the bar after she inspects it near the beginning, there are scenes where like their head sort of goes to the side and it's like it gets bigger and creates like this weird distortion. And it doesn't take someone who's seen the movie before to know that something's off with this image. There's also more yellow tint to it. I don't know why, but it just is. The cityscape scenes that I mentioned look beautiful before now look boring and lack pop to the image. And that sucks because those are some of the better looking images. And yeah, there's just some scenes where it's just oversaturated, but also there are scenes where it's too desaturated. This restoration doesn't know at all what it wants to be, and it just looks so messy. And yes, while the image quality is technically nicer and sharper, that does not equate to better. Like I mentioned with the black and white scenes in the original version, some of them have color now, or just have elements where he added color. Why? I don't know, but it was his decision. Or some of the scenes that were in color are now in black and white, such as the ending, which is one of the few scenes I think actually looks good. But also, there was no rhyme or reason to it. The original looks fine, and the new version of the ending also looks fine. As for the audio, it basically sounds identical. It might be a little better or more explosive in some of the shootout scenes or with the music, but really, the bads outweigh the goods by a landslide in this. And so it's such a shame that this movie not only has this as its restoration, but from what I know, this restoration is the most convenient version that people can access, at least legally. If you go on HBO Max and look up Fallen Angels, you're going to watch the terrible Criterion version. If you buy this box set, you're going to watch the terrible Criterion version. And the only way to access the original version is three ways. A, buying an out-of-print Blu-ray, which is inconvenient and can be very expensive. B, piracy, which shouldn't be the answer, but unfortunately is one of the few ways you can watch the original version. Or C, heading to the Internet Archive and watching a 720p cut of the original, which isn't the best quality, but it's better than anything you're getting with the Criterion version. And it's such a shame that the fans or any newcomers to this incredible film can't access this original version in a more convenient, safe, or legal way. And so that's why I'm so passionate and angry about this remaster. Not because it exists. I'd be fine with it existing if there was the original alongside of it, but it isn't. And so it's a damn shame, but yeah, I'm saying the original wins, no contest. The original wins completely over this god-awful remastered Criterion. I did not enjoy what I was watching. It actually almost made me dislike the movie just seeing how terrible this remaster is. And you know, I got to go back to remembering how incredible and how amazing the original is. And it is such a great film, just terrible remaster. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that. That being said, go watch the original in any way, shape, or form you can. And yeah, that's my opinion. That's all I can do. That's all I can say. On to the next one. Alrighty, that was my take on that. Next one, Happy Together, one of my favorites. Let's go.
Dicen que por las noches no más se le iba.
Alrighty, so Happy Together. Let's go between the two versions, the original HD Kino Lorber version and the Criterion Remaster. Beginning with Kino Lorber's. Visual-wise, there's some stunning black and white scenes at the beginning, which look incredible, both interior and exterior black and white shots, which I thought looked great. There's this stunning scene where you see the waterfall, and it's sort of like a bluish purple in the middle and like a yellow surrounding with the waves. It looks incredible. I really like how this looks on the Kino Lorber release. One of the moments I did notice looked kind of strange in this restoration, however, were some of the reds on the t-shirt. It might have just been my video encoder, but it didn't look the best at certain points, even kind of off, as you could see. The outdoor scene after the time lapse has a bad green look to it, but the scene right afterwards looks pretty great in this version, so I can't really fault this transfer that much. The scene where Tony Leung's character goes to buy more cigarettes has this incredible green look to it, almost this yellow pop to it. The exterior shot before they dance also looks absolutely phenomenal. I love just how that looks in this version. The blood on the floor while he's sweeping once he gets the butcher job looks incredible. And yeah, the color at the end where he goes to the same bar, Three Amigos, looks incredible. You really see the reds pop out in these scenes, and it just shows so much in this environment. It looks great. It looks wonderful. And this entire original version of the film just looks and sounds phenomenal. Again, going to the audio, it all sounds pretty great. Nothing I could really complain or fault the film for. And the translation was pretty good. I didn't really notice anything off about this one like I did with As Days Go By or Tears of Being Wild. Or Tears of Being Wild. You saw what I did there. I messed up. Yeah. With those two, those had very different translations, but that's what I thought about the original. Incredible, incredible, incredible master. Let's go to the Criterion. Black and white scenes look nice, but again, different as well. The wave shot is way uglier, but pretty clear, I guess. The cityscape and time lapse looks a bit desaturated, which, you know, take that as you may. There's a scene where he goes to get pizza. That scene is very desaturated, very different look to it. The blood rinse looks different, but not bad. I really don't mind how this looks in the remastered version. The scene where he's on the phone has an incredible look to it, very light blue and very sharp image to it. And the last waterfall scene looks bad. So those are just a few examples of how lame this transfer is. Yes, there's some moments where it may look better, precisely a bit clearer, but at the same time, it's such a lame transfer. Audio-wise, I couldn't really tell a difference. Translation-wise, I really didn't tell a difference. The only differences were that some of the monologues with Tony Leung's character were shortened because I guess the original negative 35mm got burned in a fire or something, and so his monologues are shorter. So if you want to see the full experience, check out the Kino Lorber version, I guess. But yeah, this Criterion's not terrible. I don't hate it as much as I hate Fallen Angels or shit, even Chungking Express's first half for that matter, but it's nothing great either. And compared to the incredible Kino Lorber, this sort of mid to okay remaster of the Criterions really doesn't warrant any need to go check it out versus the original. So for that reason, I'm gonna have to give the original Kino Lorber the win for this one. Very strange, but at the same time, you know, it just works. And so yeah, check that out in any way you can. And that's all I have to say about this film. On to the next one. Alrighty, we're almost there. Second to last, In the Mood for Love. Which one's better, the restoration or the original? Let's go. Same clothes. Yeah, I'm recording this the same time as the Happy Together. I apologize if that, whatever. Yeah, so In the Mood for Love, original versus Criterion. This one's a pretty big difference, and I'm pretty opinionated on this one, so let's begin. The original version that I have is the 2012 Criterion, which has the original color palette in an HD 2K remaster, and I kind of like that version. It looks great. There's great colors and very intentional cinematography. There's very deliberate color warmth in certain scenes. There's a sort of orange look of Chow on the typewriter. As for the female counterpart, her green dress has this very bright like color to it, which I thought was awesome. The scene where she goes to buy soup, just the outdoor exterior shots look incredible, especially with the slow motion later on. Her flower dress is very vibrant in the original version and looks incredible. Very yellow stair scene, which looks fantastic in this version. As for the audio and the translation, both were incredible. And so yeah, I really like this version of the film. Again, it's the original version. They're as original as you can get with this version. And yeah, that being said, let's go on to the remastered Criterion version. The opening, cut this out if it's wrong, but I think there's a different opening song. It's very strange, but I noticed it on this remaster rather than the original. I don't know if there was any music in the original, but I don't know, it just felt off. Yeah, off the bat, this is a much greener color palette, this Criterion one. It's much more yellow during the moving scene near the beginning. Clear image for sure. Definitely you can tell that this was remastered in 4K. There's less grain to it and a much cleaner looking image. But again, there's like very green yellows during the typewriter scene. Her dress, which I mentioned before, looks very lime colored. And the outdoor slow motion scenes, like I mentioned before, looked great on that original version. Look a lot greener There are some plates during the dinner scene where it actually looks a little too green, but the overall color palette is a change that is definitely noticeable, but I don't hate for some reason. I'm going to go on to that later, but yeah, there's like with the smoke, it's very green and blue looking, very interesting. The hotel scene is extremely red and almost green on the floor to show, again, emphasize that green. And again, the skin tone throughout the most of the movie with them looks quite natural during the end, almost very similar to the original 2012 Criterion, but the ending shot just looks plain bad in this remastered version versus the original. As for the audio basically sounded the same. Not much I can really remember on that behalf, like difference wise. And as for the translation was definitely better in this version. But again, yeah, this is a strange one because this one's going to either make or break the deal for a lot of the people. I expected myself to really hate this one, but I sort of left appreciating both versions of this movie rather than hating the new one over the old one. I think the old one definitely should be seen or has a right to exist again as a special feature, at least, God forbid, with this remaster Blu-ray release. But I don't hate it. It's definitely the lamer looking version of the film. And initially I was gonna talk really bad about it, but the more I think about it, and just as I was rewatching the film, I noticed that it doesn't look terrible. There's some scenes where it actually might look a bit better than the original, but that green overtone and the wash to it is just so interesting and strange. I don't know if Wong Kar Wai originally wanted the film to look like this, or if it in his head did look like that, or if he finally took off his glasses for this remaster. I don't know. It feels very different, but almost purposeful in a way. I think both versions have a right to exist, unlike Fallen Angels, where I just thought the new version was completely bastardizing the original. But in a way, it sort of gives away the intent of the original cinematography in the original version of In the Mood for Love. And I think that's one of the reasons why I wouldn't initially intend people to watch that as their first version of the film to watch. I don't know. I want to hate it, but I just don't. Very different images and almost giving off a very different film. It's like they added a Matrix filter over In the Mood for Love, which could be very distracting to some people. It is, but I just can't find myself to hate it as much as other people, because I think both versions are very purposeful. I think the original is just slightly more effective. The new one looks kind of strange, but as you know, it gets the feeling down overall as much as it needs to, just with the more nostalgic feeling to it as a result of the green. And so yeah, I think the original is much better, don't get me wrong, but I don't hate this remaster. I don't love it. I'm okay with its existence. Again, I just wish that the original was more easily accessible to the people who may or may not be checking out this remaster on HBO Max, the Criterion channel, or just this Blu-ray release itself. So that's what I have to say about In the Mood for Love. One more to go. I'm about to attempt to watch 2046 right now. So that being said, let's get straight into it. And finally, we have 2046, the last film in this collection. Which one's going to look better between the Criterion, between the original? Is there that much of a difference? Let's see. And finally, we are there 2046, the last film in this series. Also one of the strangest restorations, but before we get into that, let's go over the original. So the original has some really intentional cinematography. It's a very wide image, and you get the sort of feeling of nostalgia with the scenes that take place in the 60s with the main character and all the stuff going on in his life. Then you get a sense of the sort of futuristic look to it as he's writing novel and futuristic eroticas that somewhat coincide with his real life. And so overall, when you're watching the original version, you're getting a really good image, a really clear image. The color palettes for both the past and the future work really well. There's a sort of sense of nostalgia, especially it technically being a sequel to In the Mood for Love. And so overall, the color palette and everything just feels really good and looks great. As for the Criterion, this is the closest film in this entire series, in this restoration, that looks almost the same as the theatrical. but there are just enough differences to really create a sort of off-putting experience. And the reason why I say that is because the film itself has, in the restoration, a lot of moments where it sort of adds like a green tint. Not as bad as something like In the Mood for Love or even the previously mentioned Fallen Angels, but this is the first film where it looks similar enough to where you won't really get a bad experience watching this restoration for the first time. But as a 4K transfer, it actually looks worse than the original master. There's some scenes where the darker shadows of the scenes create a lot of noise or just have a lot of noise in the image. And it's really strange because the original version technically looks better. And it's a slightly different aspect ratio. I can't tell if they zoomed in or if they showed more of the image, but it's just really strange. Like the green sort of tint that are in some of the scenes gives it like sort of this nostalgic feel, but it's not really needed. As I mentioned before, it has that feeling in the original version. And so this is one of the strangest restorations in the sense that it's the most confusing restoration. This is one of the few restorations that I think doesn't know what it's trying to do. And image wise, usually you can tell like a better sense of clarity or see the image clearer with all these restorations. Even in Fallen Angels, as horrible as it looks now, it looks clearer technically. Not with this one. This is actually a kind of a worse image, and that's really strange, but also that's just how Wong Kar Wai made it, and there's not really much I can do there. So in terms of winning or what won picture and quality wise, I'd say the original definitely wins by a landslide. If there's any way you could watch that version, give it a go, but you're not really getting a bad experience. I was okay with the new Criterion version, and hopefully that gives y'all some insight as to just how it looks and feels or what you should expect from this restoration. But yeah, that being said, 14 watches, 7 different movies, we're finally there, it's over. Let's go over some of the stuff as to why he made these changes, what I think about these changes, and just some final thoughts about this overall experience, because this was a lot. And so yeah, that being said, thank you all for listening to those. Let's get to the rest of the video. So that was my take on those films, which ones I thought were better, which ones I thought were worse, and just, at this point that you're watching, I've probably seen all the films 14 times, 2 versions per each film, 7 films total, which is a lot. There's probably a lot that needed to be said there. Let's go into why Wong Kar Wai even wanted to do this in the first place. So in the actual book box set, which is quite impressive for the most part, it goes over some of the films and some of the changes that he wanted to do with some of these films. So let's try to crack that open right now. Alrighty, so in this box set, you're going to be getting this book, which basically goes over a lot of stuff with Wong Kar Wai, his inspirations. Basically, this is one of the reasons why you buy this set, also to watch the films in high definition and hopefully their best version. It's arguable whether or not some of these are better versions than their original counterparts, but in this book, it should be giving us some of the answers to figure out as to why these restorations took place and why they had to be in this box set. So later on in this booklet, around page 72, he goes over the restorations and why he wanted to go over these restorations. It says right here, Chungking Express and In the Mood for Love are presented in their original aspect ratio of 166:1. As Tears Go By, Days of Being Wild, and Happy Together presented at 185:1. 2046 is presented in 235:1. And Fallen Angels in the new 239:1 framing that represents director Wong Kar Wai's original aesthetic vision of the film. These new digital transfers were created using 4K resolution on an Ariscan film scanner from the original 35mm original camera negatives, all except As Tears Go By and Days of Being Wild were supervised and approved by Wong. So this means that the 2 films that were restored that arguably could look better were the only films that Wong Kar Wai did not supervise and approve himself. So basically what it's going over is that the reason why Wong Kar Wai went over and changed some of the stuff in these films, all but the first 2 for some reason, which are interesting because those are the best restorations of the film, are because he sees them in those original visions and wish he could have done them better, which makes sense. I understand that coming from a director, as we've seen done plenty of times before. Films like Blade Runner and Apocalypse Now have their own sets of different cuts that the directors either go into fix or change themselves. But some of the stuff that makes those films unique or their releases unique is that you can watch their original counterparts with box sets. If you want to watch the original theatrical version of Apocalypse Now, the Redux, or the Final Cut, that's not hard to do. You could just buy one on Amazon, go to Best Buy, and just pick up the Studio Canal 4K and it'll come with every version. Or Blade Runner, if you want to watch the original, the director's cut, or the final cut, or any other cuts, you can either buy them on a Blu-ray box set or just watch them straight on iTunes, Vudu, any other services that could show these versions of the movie. In this Wong Kar Wai set, however, you're limited to just these restored versions, and from now on, I think these are the only versions that Wong Kar Wai is gonna push out to his viewers to watch. If you go on HBO Max right now and look up Chungking Express or Fallen Angels or In the Mood for Love, you're not gonna get those original versions. You're gonna get the new restored Criterion versions under his supervision. And yes, while it's under his vision, it's very frustrating as the consumer or as the viewer to not be able to view those original versions, especially with a boutique label such as Criterion that loves restoring original films in the highest definition or highest quality possible. And so you have to go to other forms such as either piracy or finding out-of-print Blu-rays, which both are pretty unacceptable ways to watch films. It's very inconvenient, but both are ways in which I was able to view these. I mean, just a day ago, I was able to get a cheap copy of the Kino Lorber release of Fallen Angels, which is now out of print and goes from around $150 to $200, which is insane. And In the Mood for Love, the original Criterion I own, but because I got lucky and got one at a Barnes & Noble before they closed down the entire Criterion section, and there's a chance that that Blu-ray might be out of print soon. Chungking Express was a Criterion Blu-ray that came out in 2008 and is now out of print and worth a lot because you can't watch those original versions. And it all depends on what you appreciate or what you like. If you want to see the director's new vision or see something like that, then you know what? You're getting a lot for the price that you're getting with this box set. It comes with so many special features, and that's great. And the first two films look better, arguably, and are better, but not being able to watch those original counterparts, or at least have a disc that has some form of their original versions, is unacceptable. Completely unacceptable to the consumer. It's unacceptable to his fans, myself, and it creates a level of inconsistency and makes them want to go out of their ways to view these films in their original form. Fallen Angels, my favorite film in this entire set. If you want to watch the original version, you're either going to have to pirate it or watch it on the archive to see that original aspect ratio, to see it the way it was originally shot. I understand Wong Kar Wai would have wanted it to look like that back then, but the thing is, it didn't. And that one imperfection, but that incredible cinematography done by Christopher Doyle is what inspired many filmmakers, myself included, to enjoy his films and to become fans of his films and to create our own vision when it comes to films. And not being able to have that in this box set is heartbreaking and a bit sad and unforgivable. But at the same time, that's Wong Kar Wai's decision, that's Criterion's decision, and there's not much I can do to change that. But that being said, that's what I have to say about this. I hope this video was educational to anyone who cares about this or doesn't and now does, because this is a big deal. And as film consumers, we deserve more. So yeah, if you like this video, thank you so much for watching. Feel free to hit that like button, smash that subscribe if you want to. If not, that's all fine. And yeah, do me a favor and do your own research on this. See which one you like better. But those were just my opinions as someone who is a fan of his filmography and going into filmmaking. And yeah, I would also like to give a quick shout out before this video ends to check out these two YouTube videos. The one on the top is talking about how Christopher Doyle reacted to the restorations himself and what his thoughts are. And the one below goes over all the changes went from the original versions of the films to the new ones on the Criterions. Both are incredible videos. I'm going to put the link in the description, but yeah. Oh, and one more thing I want to add before the video ends. Making box sets like this, cardboard where you put the discs in and they're easily prone to being scratched, please stop doing that. Boutique labels, big labels, any kind of labels, just stop doing that. I had to buy an entire new Blu-ray set that came with 7 disc slots just so that these discs don't get scratched. That's ridiculous. You shouldn't have to do that. I understand Blu-ray is more scratch resistant. That doesn't mean they're scratch free. But yeah, please stop doing that. That's all I have to say. All right, later.